What's up, everyone, and welcome to another Fantasy Mafia podcast, NBA edition. My name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, and I am here with my co-host, the Fantasy Caveman. Been quite a few weeks since we've done one of these episodes, but with the NBA playoffs starting, we have some more teams that were eliminated, so we're going to be breaking down the non-playoff teams right now. These are the guys that got eliminated in the bubble. So today we're starting with the wonderful Washington Wizards. Caveman, you excited about the Wizards?
I mean, we're gonna get into it, but man, if only Bradley Beal would have actually played in the bubble. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand why he didn't. I mean, who wants to play for the Wizards? But yeah, if only they would. Who knows? We might not be talking about him right now had Bradley Beal played in the bubble. So.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting. They went 1-7 in the bubble, and you and I were talking about this before we started recording. But technically, because of their winning percentage, they fell below the Charlotte Hornets, who didn't get invited back. So technically, the Wizards finished, according to ESPN, in 10th place in the East with a 25-47 record. Scott Brooks is currently their head coach. He's a coach that's had a lot of success. He took the Thunder to the NBA Finals. He's one of those coaches. I think they need to make a determination because for me, Scott Brooks is the kind of coach you have if you're ready to win now. If they think that they're ready to win now and they're confident that John Wall and Bradley Beal are going to be there for the long term, I think he's a great coach for this situation. If they're going to go full on rebuild and get rid of Wall and Beal, then maybe they look to move on. Not this offseason, but Scott Brooks actually has had some success with the Wizards too. They made the playoffs the first 2 seasons he was there. He had 49 wins his first year. So this is a good head coach. He's not a big name to a lot of casual fans, but a very successful head coach.
Yep.
I'll hop into some of their season leaders here. Bradley Beal obviously led the team in points with 30.5. He had an okay season. Davis Bertans had 15.4 points. Rui Hachimura, 13.5 points. Thomas Bryant, 13.2. Really their starting lineup right there. Next for rebounds, Thomas Bryant led the way with 7.2. Hachimura 6.1. I was glad to see Hachimura get some minutes this year. Actually averaged over 30 minutes a game. Really high energy guy. I always liked him at Gonzaga, so I'm happy to see he's starting to carve out a role in the NBA. Next with rebounds, we have Ian Mahanmini. Close enough.
Close enough.
Close enough. 5.7 rebounds. Troy Brown also had 5.6 rebound from the guard position. Bradley Beal led the way with 6.1 assists and 1.2 steals. Troy Brown had 1.2 steals. And then Mahinmi had 1.2 blocks per game. Thomas Bryant also right behind him with 1.1 blocks. Anybody from this Wizards roster that stood out to you for the 2019-2020 season?
Yeah, a couple. I mean, obviously, we don't need to really talk about the season Bradley Beal put together. I mean, the only guy on the Wizards that really they could rely upon to score, and he's very underrated as a defender in my opinion, but he shouldered so much of the offensive load that he really didn't have anything left to give on the defensive end. So I think it kind of made him look a little bit worse than he actually is defensively.
Biggest All-Star snub, right? Come on. He didn't make the All-Star team.
That's one of the biggest All-Star snubs in recent memory right there. But a couple we mentioned it with their leaders, but Davis Bertans had a really solid season. You could probably say he was probably their number 2 option behind Bradley Beal pretty much the entire year, which I like Davis Bertans, but if Davis Bertans is your number 2 option, you're not really going to do much. But he had 15.4 points, 42% from 3-point range this season, so he's really good 3-point shooter for him.
Yep. And 8th most points in the league, 3-point field goals as well, 8th most.
Yep. And we were talking about this on our on a live recently, but one of the biggest like advanced stats I'd like to look at is plus minus. Kind of gives you an idea of how effective they are on the court. And Bertans was actually their Wizards' most effective player in terms of plus minus. He had the best plus minus differential on the team. So I think they really they were really effective when he was on the court, and we're gonna obviously get into this when we talk about their free agents. But I think he's definitely, if they gotta try to find a way to re-sign him. We'll have to see how that shapes out. But last before we move on, Thomas Bryant. I mean, kind of mainly impressed with what he was able to do in the restart. I mean, true, he did it for a team that went 1-7 in the restart, but in the bubble, he averaged 18.6 points, 8.9 rebounds, 2 blocks, 1.4 steals. Mm-hmm. Shot 53% from the field and 40.5% from three. So I think what that does, I think going forward for them, I think Thomas Bryant is I think a guy that the Wizards can rely on going forward and kind of as their top big man, especially since we don't know what's going to happen with Bertans. So really, I mean, it kind of Thomas Bryant wasn't that great before the bubble, so I think the bubble gave him a great opportunity to show what he can provide to the Wizards going forward.
Yeah, and Thomas Bryant, I think, was much proved as a defender, and that's one of the areas where the Wizards really struggled this season defensively. They were, they scored points with Bradley Beal. They didn't really have trouble scoring points, and even Bertans, I mean, he's not the best second option, but he's kind of a modern swing man, and how many three-pointers he makes, so solid offensive option. But they really struggle. Achimara was pretty solid defensively, but after that, a lot of struggles. But this is still a young team, people forget too. Thomas Bryant's only 23, Achimara 22. They were two of their minute leaders this year, so a lot to look forward to, especially with John Wall. Excuse me. Especially John Wall. I'm allergic to John Wall. Especially with John Wall coming back in the future here. But let's go over their depth chart here and see what it looks like moving forward. When John Wall comes back, obviously they'll have him at the point, Bradley Beal at 2. Behind them, they have Shabazz right now, who's going to be entering free agency. Shabazz Napier, Troy Brown, Gary Payton, or whatever he is, the 5th. He's only the 2nd. For some reason, I thought he was the 3rd, but he's Gary Payton Jr. So he played some minutes for him this year. At the 3, they had Bertrand starting, Troy Brown and Isaac Bonga behind them. At the 4, Rui Hachimura, Moritz Wagner, center Thomas Bryant, Moritz Wagner backing him up. So a lot of the names we've already mentioned. Yeah. It's one of the things looking through their depth chart. They did not have great depth this year, and I think that's one of the issues they're going to have to address during this free agent period. But to go over some of their big free agents now, they have Mahinmi, who's going to be a free agent. He made $15 million this year. Davis Bertrands is going to, $15 million. I didn't missay that, just for those of you who are listening saying, no, he didn't make $15 million. No, he seriously did. So I'm not lying. Davis Bertrands made $7 million last year. He's going into free agency. Shabazz Napier. I like Shabazz as a bench guard. I think I think he'll command a decent salary on the open market here, but we'll see. They need some depth, especially with Wall's injury history. Gary Payton Jr. is going to be a free agent. Let me mention some of these other guys that you'll get angry at me for if I don't mention them. Jarrett Uthoff, Jarian Grant, and a name that I'm not going to try to pronounce. Anges Paskins. That's what we're going with there. That's my attempt at that. He probably played less than 20 minutes for them, would be my guess. And then you had a couple two-way contracts, Garrison Matthews and Jonathan Williams. Did I cover everybody for you?
Yeah, you did. Garrison Matthews actually played in 18 games.
Oh, what do I know? Probably got 2 10-game tryouts then. He probably they played pretty well his first 10, and they
averaged a solid 12.5 minutes a game.
Yep. And then they actually have quite a bit of salary coming off the books from
Mhm.
players that actually aren't on their roster. CJ Miles is still getting $8.7 million. Jonathan Simmons, a few other guys around a million bucks here, but they're going to have, it looks like, around 9, 10, around $12 million in open cap. And that's just from guys that aren't on their roster. And if they're not able to sign Mahinmi, Bertrand, I mean, there's a lot of salary cap
Not
space
able.
for them.
You really think the Wizards are going to try to bring back Mahinmi?
I hope they don't bring back Mahinmi. I mean, realistically, if I'm the Wizards, they have the 22nd most salary cap space right now, or the 22nd highest salary cap space. So they have a ton of space right now heading into 2020, 2021. So that's counting all these contracts coming off the books. If I'm then, I'm definitely signing Bertrand and Shabazz because, like I said, they need that depth. I'd actually consider Gary Payton, who actually is a pretty solid defender. I mean, if he's your third or fourth guard off the bench, you need a guy like that that's solid defensively and can come in and play some tough minutes for you. So
Yeah.
I think that, obviously Mahinmi is not going to be a priority for him unless he takes a veteran minimum of 500,000, something ridiculously low. But I don't know with his lavish lifestyle if he's going to want to do that now. So if I'm them, I'm prioritizing Bertrand Shabazz and Gary Payton. What do you think?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, we're not touching. I wouldn't touch Mahinmi with that. Bertans, I think, there has to be their number one priority. They lose. I don't think they can't really afford to lose Bertans, especially if they're looking to with Wall coming back next year. They can't lose Bertans because then you're really losing. You're losing so much offense. I mean, he's not the greatest. He's probably one of their weakest defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Like he can shoot, and it was evident this year. So I don't think they can really afford to lose that offense. Napier, like the point bring up, especially with the John Wall's injury history. Napier is a very quality backup point guard who I wouldn't. Who, if he had to be my starter for a few games, that wouldn't be. I don't think that would be the worst thing. I really like him there. But yeah, Bertrands. I mean, Peyton, depending on what they do with the other two and what else happens, he could be a guy that you could possibly look to bring back. But yeah, definitely the other two guys. Definitely, I think if they can re-sign them, I think they would be in decent shape.
Yep, I would agree. So we'll hop into their off-season needs then. I already mentioned they have the 22nd highest salary cap, so they do have some space there. But if they want to sign Bertrands, I mean, based on the NBA market, I bet you Bertrands makes in the $20 million range per
Probably.
season. That'd be my guess he'll get a 3 or 4 year deal for 3 years 60, 3 years 8 or 4 years 80. That'd be my prediction for him if I had to lay it out there somewhere around there. Shabazz, we'll see. I don't know. There's not a ton of when I was going through it, there's quite a few interesting free agents, but not a ton of depth guards. So Shabazz might command not $20 million, but you might see him jump into that $8 to $10 million a year range. That wouldn't surprise me. So that'll take a little bit of their space, but they still have some room to play with. So what do you think they need to target this offseason? Anyone specifically or just any generic positions?
Obviously their number one target is, we mentioned this several times, but they need to re-sign Bertans. That has to be their number one priority. But I think they need rim protectors. Mahinmi was supposed to be that for him, but he's just tall, and I don't think he's fat because he looks kind of skinny, but he's a tall waste of space. I was thinking about it. They really haven't had the Wizards haven't had a good rim protector since Nene and Brendan Haywood.
Yeah, and I mean that wasn't prime Nene either.
No, it was. But I'm saying that's the last time they had a reliable rim protector. So they need some rim protection. We'll see what kind of avenues they look to get that, but also I think some perimeter defense. I think they kind. I mean, I think part of it has to do with uh Bradley Beal being subpar defensively
Hmm.
because he had the shoulder to load offensively. I think that kind of made their perimeter defense look a little weak. So I think they need some guys to kind of defensively take the pressure off of Wall and Beal. Uh, and I think what they need to do, and this is obviously going to apply more towards the draft. Uh, but I think they have several guys. They have several pieces in place. They have Wall and Beal and Achimura if they resign. I think they need to start targeting some guys with like high ceilings. I think getting if I mean they've been trying to and Rui solid, but he doesn't. I don't think Rui really has that high of a ceiling. I think he's more of a
Hmm.
like a safer guy. I think they need to start going after some high ceiling guys. Looking towards the draft, I think they're number one. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce this guy's name, but the center out of USC.
Yep.
No, maybe I will try. Onyeka Okunwu. Good,
Yep.
close enough.
Okongwu. Yep.
Uh, I think he would be a great day one fit for him up, especially if you pair him with you pair him with Bertans, who is a 3-4 kind of guy. You got a he's an instant rim protector that they haven't had in 15 years or something, and he's a pretty good rebounder too. Another guy I could see them going mate in the draft. I think and I don't think we have recorded a pod about this guy yet, but we probably will at some point. That Sadiq Bey from Villanova.
Hmm.
I think he's he plays some of the best defense in the draft in my opinion. I think that's some what the Wizards need aside from rim protection. So I think and he can shoot and he's a pretty solid shooter from 3 too. So I think he's another guy that they could possibly target in the draft.
Yep, I would definitely agree with you. The rim protector, it's just depth too, because when you look at it, Achimara, I don't really consider him a big man that's defending
No,
guys in the paint. Thomas Bryant can, but I think he's more of the modern stretch big man where he's
yeah,
shooting threes. He's on the perimeter. He is down low, and you see that with his block shots down in the paint. But, they really don't have many big men. So I agree that that needs to be a priority. I mentioned earlier, but their defense struggled pretty significantly. So I think getting a wing defender, you mentioned Sadiq Bey was one of the guys that was on my list, Devin Vassell, who we talked about, Josh Green, who is also a really strong
yeah,
defender. In free agency, I don't see a ton of strong defenders I would target. The one guy I keep mentioning, he's with the Nuggets right now, is Jeremy Grant. He actually has one of the best defensive ratings in the entire league, but he's not one of those guys you really want starting. So I really like the idea of them pairing Jeremy Grant with Davis Bertans because I think they complement each other really well. One doesn't have a very strong offensive game where that's what the other one has. So I think they could be a really nice complement to one another. But I think this is a team that needs to decide right now. As much as I could see them targeting a high upside player, if I'm them, I'm more targeting somebody that can step in and play right now. Because you have two superstars. I mean, I like John Wall and Bradley Beal, and that combination is very close to being good enough to at least put you. The East is kind of, I mean, it's up in the air right now. I mean, we have the Bucks at the top, and then a lot of teams who we have a lot of question marks in regards to. So if the Wizards want to put themselves in that conversation, they just need another big time piece to step in. Because with the starting five they have right now, Wall, Beal, Bertrand, Achimara, Bryant, plus you add their first round pick, I bet you this is a team that makes the playoffs in the East. I would be pretty certain with it if they're all able to stay healthy together. But they need some defensive depth. They're not going to go very far in the playoffs without defense. and I think that needs to be their priority both on the wing and as a big guy, as you mentioned. It just they have to be more defensive minded, otherwise they're not going to go very far, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I said, I think with their draft pick, I think that Okunu from USC is like too perfect of a fit for him.
Mm-hmm.
You get them to go with the offensive minded guys they have in the starting unit. Then you put an anchor and a rim protector at the 5 for him. Although he is a little, and we'll talk about him more when we do our draft pod on him, I'm sure. But he is only 6'9".
Yep.
So he's a little shorter, but I think he can overcome that somewhat because he's very versatile and he gets up there to block shots and rebound and all that. So yeah.
There's a real possibility too. Right now they're projected to have the 9th overall pick, the Wizards, which is funny since they were so close to making the playoffs, but there's a real possibility. This is kind of interesting. We haven't talked about it, but James Wiseman has actually been falling down a lot of people's draft boards. I guess a lot of scouts don't like his attitude. But I mean, there's a real possibility. So a few mock drafts that I've seen, he's fallen to the 7 or 8 range. I mean, that's where we're talking. I think that's stupid because we've talked about it. The talent in this draft is not very high. It's not a high level. There's a lot of guys that I think will be solid role players, but there's not very many guarantees to be superstars. I mean, James Wiseman to me is one of the top 3 most talented players in this class. I don't care what his attitude is. You don't let him slip. I mean, I kind of get it because a lot of these teams are trying to rebuild, and you don't want that kind of negativity. But man, could you imagine if the Wizards got him though? That would be really intriguing.
But I would be if Golden State does not take Wiseman. That would be. I have a hard time believing Golden State will not take Wiseman. If you think about it, I may not know it's a Wizard. I know we're doing a Wizards pod, but if Golden State doesn't take Wiseman, they are just idiots. But yeah, if he somehow falls in this range, or if he falls enough where the Wizards can then possibly trade up, I think Wiseman's another guy that would be a perfect fit. But I still don't see him slipping that far, so didn't really cross my thoughts that much, simply because I don't, with his attitude, not every guy and almost every guy coming into the NBA has some kind of attitude, so I don't get what that's about. But yeah, so he'd be nice, but I have a hard time seeing him slip that far.
Yeah, so I think moving forward, this is a team that's going to compete for an Eastern Conference playoff spot next season. Let's talk quickly. I want your thoughts on where you think they're going to finish next year, and do you think there's any possibility that they move on from Beal or John Wall?
Ooh, that's the thing. They've been trying to move on to John Wall ever since they signed him to that contract.
Yep, nobody wants that contract.
5 years, 175 or something like that for him. I'm not sure how many years he has left. He has at least 2 or 3 years left on that deal yet. They've been trying to move John Wall for
3 more years, by the way.
Jesus.
And he makes $40 million, $43 million, $46 million.
Boy.
Yeah.
But they've been trying to move John Wall, and I don't see them being able to move John Wall with that deal. So I think he's getting paid a lot, but I think if he's healthy, he's still one of the best. He's one of the best point guards in the league if he's healthy. So now that I was reading, I can see, but I don't think the Wizards need to trade Beal to be competitive next year. Because if they trade Beal, you're basically you want to talk about. I wouldn't quite put them on the Knicks level because they would have a seemingly healthy John Wall, you would think. But if they shift Bradley Beal off in the offseason, they'd be one of the worst teams in the league. Like
Yeah,
it would be a clear bottom up rebuild, and they said, and going back to your point about Scott Brooks, who they did say he will be back for the final year. He's on his final year of his deal. So I think that's something to keep in mind. I think they're gonna definitely, at least not this season. I don't see them kind of doing anything with Beal, especially if they have Brooks back as coach. I don't think I think they try to be competitive this year and see what a healthy Wall and Beal can do, and then we'll kind of see going forward. But yeah, I don't see them trading Beal, and I do see them. I guess I could definitely see them. Assuming health, assuming it doesn't happen again where Wall says he's 110% healthy and then he goes down like he did last year. We've heard this from John Wall before. But if everybody stays healthy, they're like thinking they're somewhere in like five. I don't think 5-6 range if they're healthy. I think they have a lot of they have several young pieces going forward. And Wall and Beal is kind of like the East version of Dame and CJ, kind of like a poorer version, I would say. Because Wall really isn't anywhere near the shooter that Dame is, but yeah, I have a hard time believing they won't be a playoff team if they're both healthy next year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So I don't think I have any other thoughts. So I think that's all we have on the Washington Wizards today. So we appreciate you guys watching. If you don't already, make sure you go and like the Fantasy Mafia on Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've also been posting our pods more consistently on Spotify and Anchor and Google and Apple Podcasts, all those fun platforms. So you can listen as well if you don't want to watch us on YouTube. And make sure you check out all of our articles on thefantasymafia.com. And we have a Facebook group called the Fantasy Hotspot where you can go talk all things sports, not just NFL fantasy, but NFL news, NBA, NHL, MLB. So make sure you check that out. But we appreciate you guys listening, and we will see you next time.
Yep.